All right. Well, we got a bunch of folks who have started to join here. So welcome everyone to the June NDSA Infrastructure Interest Group meeting. Thank you so much for joining us. And see some folks I'm familiar with, also maybe a few new people. Hey, Tricia, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Doing well. Nice to see you, Eric.
Yeah, it looks like I think with here's a quick question. You think you'll be joining us for the September meeting as well, since we'll be talking about OCFL? Okay,
Definitely.
awesome, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so just in case other folks are just joining, I'll put a link to the running meeting notes in the chat there. So if y'all could take a quick look just in terms of housekeeping, we have an entry here on the second page for the June 15 meeting and just an attendance list. If you're open to adding your name there, that'd be great. And then if there's anyone who is attending for the first time, yeah, please let me know. There's a section there as well, but if you're open to doing a quick intro, we'd love to find out what brought you here and who you are and all that sort of thing. Um, no, totally optional. So today we are kind of dividing the meeting in half. So we'll have both Snowden Becker from the LOX program at Stanford and Chelsea Deneau from the Michigan Digital Preservation Network. They'll be chatting about both LOX and the new MDPN implementation toolkit for LOX 2.0. So that will be the latter half of our meeting. And then the first half, also with regard to distributed digital preservation. Um, oh, okay. Scott, I just saw you know. Hang on a sec. And yeah, also with regard to distributed digital preservation, we'll be talking a little bit about decentralized storage. This is something that I've just been researching lately, and also just from the standpoint of at California Digital Library, we are looking at a variety of different storage options as we go forward. I think a lot of folks just continuously do this, but it's been kind of surprising to me finding out that there are a couple of S3 fronted decentralized storage organizations out there providing what they're calling archival storage for digital preservation. So just wanted to kind of go over that a bit. And let's see. Okay, yeah, I just got a note from Scott Prater, so let me go ahead and give you right access. Is anybody else having trouble with adding to the notes document? If you want to just drop a note in chat, that'd be great.
I updated
Um,
it, Eric.
oh, okay, great. Great. Thanks, Carol. Appreciate it. And it looks like Martha doesn't have access either. Sorry about that. I thought this was all shared out.
It was view only. I changed it to edit.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it looks like everybody now has access. Awesome. Thanks. Okey Duke. Um, and Mike, thanks for your note in the chat. So you're from University of Arizona Libraries. So thanks for joining us. Just taking awesome. Oh, okay. And your colleague is Stacy Erdman as well. Okay, nice. Okay, great. So I did put together a list of 12 slides to go through that'll kind of take us through from the beginnings of blockchain all the way through to these couple of storage providers that I discovered that I've also heard of through different conversations. So it'll be a kind of a quick history all the way up until now type thing. And let me go ahead and share that out. Before we actually get into that, I just want to mention, so for folks looking at the running notes, you'll see that in the announcement section for September, we are going to have a discussion regarding the Oxford Common File layout, and several folks who have helped author and edit the OCFL specification will be joining us then. So that's what that particular meeting is going to be focused on. And then for December, we have not yet come up with an agenda or a topic. So by all means, if you have any ideas, please feel free to jot them down here in the notes. We've also got um, our topics poll from the beginning of the year. So we have quite a few other topics to kind of choose from there that a lot of people have expressed interest in. So yeah, we'll be navigating that between now and obviously the end of the year. We've got plenty of time. And then, yeah, John, let me go ahead and post the link to the notes again. There you go. And then Marcella, thanks for joining as well from the Art Institute of Chicago. Okay, that's yeah. You recently joined in NDSA, so yeah. Really appreciate your involvement, and uh, any ideas or suggestions are always welcomed here for our interest group meetings. Okay, so without further ado, I'll go ahead and share out this presentation. And feel free to stop me at any time while we're going through this. A lot of this may be review for folks, but I was hoping to put together kind of an interesting timeline that was more focused on preservation prospects. So um, let's start with blockchain and kind of go from there. So what this is going to step through essentially is the technology for Web 3.0 and what has enabled the idea of having decentralized storage and also decentralized storage that is always checked on, relatively durable, but not exactly comparable to what we're typically used to in terms of, on-premises storage and cloud-based storage. So yeah, let's kind of we'll do some comparison and contrasting here. So um, just it was surprising to me to find out that way back in 1982, David Chown's dissertation was the basis of blockchain. He actually put it together in 1979, between 79 and 82, and so it goes way back in terms of the idea of organizing what we call today a blockchain that is self-managed and decentralized, and essentially a ledger for taking into account a different list of records that are for the most part supposed to be immutable as you go forward, because if you think of a chain and you think of blocks on the blockchain, you really can't, the way things are managed via cryptographic hashes, you really can't change anything in the past with any block in the past without like impacting everything that's been written from there forward. So it is meant to be extremely secure, or from the standpoint of unchangeable without having a particular record of what's happening. Yeah, that is, you can see obviously why it's been used for crypto. And by all means, I'll be the first to admit that I am not a subject matter expert on cryptocurrency or blockchain or anything like that. But just learning more about just how blockchains are implemented has been interesting. So just a couple of links here. I'll share out this presentation as well. There's also a link to David Chown's dissertation there if you'd like to check it out. It is printed in what looks like it came from probably a typewriter. Um, so
It was the 90s.
yeah, we had and also initial word processors with those little tiny LCD screens and a big keyboard in front of them.
I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll fast forward all the way to 2008, 2009 here, and this is the point where Bitcoin and the quote unquote trustless ledger were introduced by Satoshi Nakamoto, although my understanding is that it was more of a team rather than a single individual who put all of this together. But Bitcoin is introduced, and it creates the first decentralized, cryptographically secure ledger capable of tracking state and value without any kind of central intermediaries. So this is a distributed, essentially automated method of keeping track of everything. And let me check the chat really quick. Right. Who is Satoshi exactly? Yes. Was there actually an individual Satoshi Nakamoto? It is a mystery. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and there's probably a lot more to read there too, and I haven't done yet. So a little ways after that, and about 4 or 5 years later, Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain launches. And the big change here really is that it's no longer just for keeping track of transactions and having this ledger. Now this enables what Ethereum blockchain enables, you can actually deploy decentralized applications on the blockchain. So it really kind of shifts things from just simple ledger and transactions to Web3 or quote unquote Web3, which here we're managing, all of a sudden we're managing data and identities and digital assets. So that was a huge change that took place about 11 years ago. So from our perspective, the big problem here with that was, of course, I think a challenge to anyone introducing blockchains and having decentralized applications apparently is that there was no great way of storing mass amounts of data, significant amounts of data through blockchain, because apparently there's a level 1 blockchain, which is mainly for like transactions and the ledger. And then now there's this notion of introducing level 2, which essentially takes a block of data, a chunk of data. It can be more than one block, but it essentially enables things to be tracked over the course of several weeks to ensure that data is actually stored in a location. So you're now able to, without a mass number of transactions on the ledger, you're now able to actually point to data that is sitting in a particular location that you can now quote unquote store. So yeah, it's not, as the second note here says, it's not prohibitively expensive anymore with this kind of layer 2 blockchain that's in the background. So this is the beginning of a way to address storage needs in Web3. And then a little bit later, or well, let's see, right around 2014 as well, I'm going to struggle this is Juan Bennett, founds Protocol Labs with this vision of building a decentralized infrastructure layer for data. There is the launch of the Interplanetary File System, or IPFS, which is today the main distributed, or I should say decentralized file system that's out there that's supported through blockchain. And one of the important things here is IPFS shifts the web from location addressing for URLs to where a file sits on a server to what's called content addressing. And content addressing is not necessarily where something fits, but identifying a file by its hash. So that is a unique hash or content ID across the blockchain that lets you essentially find your data. And we should keep content IDs or CIDs in mind, because at the end of our conversation, I'm going to ask a few questions, just food for thought kind of thing, like with regard to persistent identifiers that we currently use across a lot of archival content and in the cloud and elsewhere, versus what that means to also perhaps track the CID of a piece of content on the blockchain and in IPFS. So then, being able to find your data ensures its integrity, but it still relies on what they say, voluntary participation to keep the data online. That means we need to have service providers out there, not service, but individuals or services or organizations that participate in the IPFS for actually storing the data, and what's the incentive there for them to actually participate is kind of the next question. So so you probably have heard of Filecoin if you're not already very familiar with it. I mean, I was somewhat familiar with it, but I'm now more so after going through here and recording this. But Filecoin is essentially a layer on top of the blockchain that's incentives based. So there has to be some sort of marketplace where individual users like us pay to store data to storage providers, like I was just mentioning, and those storage providers can earn cryptocurrency for hosting your data. So right now in IPFS, there's a token, a native token called the FIL or FIL, and that is apparently what is used to actually supply payment to any of the storage providers that are out on the network. Now, what we'll see with the couple of service providers that I found for storage later on in this presentation is that they are charging for storage in actual dollars, but the storage cost from what most of our community is used to is relatively comparable to what we see for paying for storage in the cloud. So on a per terabyte basis, it's almost right in line there with how much you might expect to pay for cloud storage. So the main net, or this is the way I've seen Filecoin talk about the launch of real service. Filecoin mainnet launches in 2020. These test nets that are in quotes here are really just kind of like sandbox areas for testing storage and making sure that incentives and payment and everything trades hands appropriately, everything's located appropriately and can be identified in terms of its CID. So between 2015 and 2020, there was a whole lot of testing that happened. And then really this is about ensuring that the data is actually being stored correctly without any kind of central auditing happening. And then to really do that, they introduced two cryptographic proofs. There's actually a third one that was just implemented about a year and a half ago. So we'll talk about that one too. But when you start reading about blockchain and storage and everything, you'll find these different proofs that are out there, cryptographic proofs. And these are the two that were initially put out for Filecoin. So one of them is proof of replication, saying that the storage providers actually created a unique copy of your data on physical hardware. The other one is called proof of space-time, which, of course, being a sci-fi fan, makes me chuckle a little bit in a good way. Continuously verifying over time the provider is still dedicating that unique physical storage space to the file that you've sent to the net or to the blockchain, to the Filecoin mainnet. Then in 2024, this is, from what I understand, this is the new cryptographic proof that's actually enabled more what we call warm storage or hot storage to happen in Filecoin. And this is another check that's actually looking to obtain regular verifiable assurances that the data is consistently online and immediately available for applications or for, in our case, say a digital preservation repository. So this is key, obviously, making sure that the data is available. It's not just sitting somewhere, which would say in cold storage, which we're used to, say, on a tape or something like that, where it takes a significant amount of time to bring back. So the in between, somewhere around 2020 and now, there was a massive amount of scaling that happened, and we're talking about not terabytes, not petabytes, but exabytes. So there's a really huge amount of storage that is being provided around the world through the Filecoin network or mainnet. With that third cryptographic proof, we're shifting more, or they are shifting more towards warm storage, which makes sure that everything's accessible. You could even call it, hot online storage. Um, I think that's probably yet to be seen. And then there's this notion of a Filecoin pin, which it's what they call a persistence layer for IPFS content, essentially like on a daily basis, making sure that that content is there, and being able to audit that content. So it's, if you think about the scale here, that's huge. And yeah, okay. Thanks, Newton, for the note, for the exabyte. Um, so to talk a little bit about community adoption, this is where if you go to Filecoin's, there's a Filecoin Foundation, and there are posts on the progress, of course, like blog posts and history, about the progress and adoption of mainnet and the interplanetary file system. The Smithsonian this is a small scale adoption that I read some about. Of course, there's some links here. Then Starling Lab launched a major storage node at University of Southern California. And if you're aware of the USC Shoah Foundation, that is a massive oral history and visual history archive that USC has been maintaining. And a while back, I think this was maybe 3 years ago or so, we had a member of the Shoah Foundation, USC. His name is Samuel. I can't remember his last name right at the moment, but he joined us to talk a little bit about essentially their infrastructure at USC and infrastructure for data sets, infrastructure for the foundation's archive, and so on and so forth. So that was a huge change there, and serious adoption. Apparently this is a replica of the content. This is not the main copy or the primary copy of the content being stored in IPFS, which of course is something that what's interesting to me too, or interesting to us, I suppose. Like in the near future, will we trust this enough to be a replica? To provide a replica of digital preservation content. And, from its current track record, I'll let everyone draw their own conclusions. But in my opinion, I'm going to be watching this as things go forward. I mean, this presentation is not an endorsement of IPFS at any level, but hey, Chelsea, thanks for joining. But it's just been really neat to see what's happened in the past, like 5 or 6 years, especially. And then these two storage providers, one is actually the second one, Phil.one, is an option that's being provided through the Filecoin network and IPFS directly. Storage.io is a separate organization, but they're both essentially putting decentralized storage behind an S3 compliant API. So for many people, having that S3 compliance and being able to essentially make a call to S3 to store your data is a big game changer. I know for us, when we're considering tape storage or tape archives, which we're doing right now for the California Digital Libraries repository, I mean, we couldn't even consider it without that S3 interface. So again, S3 also means that you have the expectation, unlike Glacier, in this case, you have the expectation of being able to verify that your content is available and out there and as you want it to be. Both of these organizations or services are going through some certification right now, especially Fill Out One, the whole like SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO 27001 certifications. This is really about the durability and the availability of the storage. And I'm I'm getting I'm guessing that folks are probably more familiar with these than I am, especially we have all of our service providers are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, but to actually dive into what that is, I couldn't rattle it off the top of my head. But the information is out there. So yeah, let's see. So it's almost 10:30. I do want to kind of switch gears and hand over the discussion to Chelsea and Snowden soon. But I will share out this presentation and some of the things we're considering with regard to just kind of observing what's happening in this space. One of the most important things to me is that in a digital preservation repository with multiple copies being managed, it's one thing to address your content in the cloud via cloud key. And for us, that key actually starts with an archival resource key, an ARC, and every file from there on out has its own URL to a location in cloud storage or object storage. So how could we also keep track of a CID for content that is out in the IPFS? And does that mean we store that metadata within a record of a system that manages ARCs, or do we store it in our own system? How do we replicate that to make sure we have a backup copy of it so we know where everything is? How do we have a service actually go out to the IPFS and verify that our content is there on a regular basis, fixie checking, that sort of thing? So yeah, these are some questions that, if we have a little bit of time at the end, we can come back to, but again, they're more food for thought with regard to this presentation. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. And yeah, so let's see, Snowden, Chelsea, what kind of time do you think you'll want for talking about the toolkit and locks?
How much time do you have? Because I could talk about it all day.
Well, I have two until this room is being taken because I am at a conference. So
Well, I can just take 2 minutes to briefly introduce locks, what it is, how it works, and then pass off to Chelsea to talk about their fabulous locks preservation toolkit and implementation toolkit, which is not in focus, but should be on everyone's reading list. Does that work for you, Eric?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and shift gears. And yeah, again, just welcoming Snowden and Chelsea to the conversation here. They volunteered to talk about the MDPN toolkit and locks. We really appreciate having you here, and go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
It's an honor to be with all of you. This group is such a valuable resource, and it's really lovely to be able to talk about what we do at Locks and in the broader community of Locks users and networks. So many of you have probably heard the phrase "lots of copies keep stuff safe." I learned it when I was in library school, these many years ago, in the very beginning of this century. And what I did not know then, and definitely know now, is that locks is not just a fundamental principle of digital preservation. It is the software foundation, the open source software foundation for distributed digital preservation in action. So there is a principle that is locks, and there is a practice that is locks. Our open source software effectively lets computers talk to one another to validate and and self-repair stored data within a community-based owned infrastructure. We started as a project in response to the original digital revolution in scholarly publishing. Our founders, Vicky Reich and David Rosenthal, were aware that as we moved into digital distribution and digital publishing mechanisms, libraries were gaining a lot of critical affordances, like being able to link to, hypertext was very exciting and very new, being able to link to data sets, rich media, etc. But what they were losing were some of the critical affordances of the paper publishing era, namely that when a library subscribes to a journal, they get a hard copy that sits on their shelf that gets sent to the bindery for preservation at the end of the volume year, and that is a permanent part of the library's collection. Digital publishing changed that model, changed ownership, and eliminated the right of first sale doctrine for sharing content or long-term access. So the original LOCKSS network was which is now called the Global LOCKSS Network, is a coalition of libraries that have access to subscribed content through web crawlers and a linked locally owned storage, a LOCKSS box that sits in the library and the subscriber library and functions as a virtual digital shelf for permanent, long-term, post-cancellation, and failover access to subscribed content. Now, our very clever colleagues in the library and archives community realized very quickly that the software that the Global LOCKSS Network users were employing to have their LOCKSS boxes talk to one another, validate and authenticate and automatically repair stored and preserved content was like Pete's hot sauce. Like you could use that on anything. And so from the initial proof of concept of MetaArchive, a 20-year-long collaborative initiative of preservation, a number of regional and affinity-based archives and preservation networks have grown out of that initial use case of the Global LOCKSS Network. MDPN is our poster child, not just for a replicable, sustainable, and scalable model for community-based digital preservation. It is also the alpha user for our LOCKSS 2.0 software, which is an entirely re-architected version of the original flavor LOCKSS or LOCKSS Classic, and it has exciting new potential for users with the greatest need and the fewest resources, and for truly regionally owned and community-driven preservation efforts. It was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, RIP, and has been very ably headed up by program manager Chelsea Denault. And one of their final deliverables is the Preservation Implementation Toolkit, which I just referenced. I will put a link to that in the chat, and I will hand it over to Chelsea to talk about MDPN, your members, your marvels, and the miracles you are working with advancing the LOCKSS preservation model on a community basis. Take it away, Chelsea.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Snowden. And I already dropped the link while you were chatting. So one last thing for you to do. Yes, thank you so much, Snowden, for that wonderful introduction to the LOCKSS software and to MDPN. So for just as a little bit of background for folks who are unfamiliar with MDPN, the Michigan Digital Preservation Network was founded in 2020 after an IMLS grant that really sought to better understand statewide need for a shared preservation service here in Michigan. And so that included a series of workshops around what a statewide shared preservation service might include, such as shared governance, shared storage, some technical needs. But it also included a community-wide survey of cultural memory institutions across the state to say, or to ask, right, are you doing digital preservation at your institution? If you are you satisfied with the solution that you have? If you're not, what are some of the challenges? And so that grant, which was called Stepping Stones to the National Digital Platform, which is run by Grand Valley State University here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And really did find that there was a huge need, especially among smaller institutions, underfunded institutions, understaffed institutions. So think community archives, small local museums, historical societies, who didn't have a lot of deep technical knowledge and didn't have a lot of, in many cases, professional archival skills. And so the MDPN was created through an MOU between several universities here in Michigan, our host institution, the Midwest Collaborative for Library Services, and the State Library, the Library of Michigan. Very quickly, we realized that we wanted, in being the alpha user of the new LOX 2.0 software, we really wanted to be able to provide a roadmap for other states and other regions to be able to build their own preservation network, but be able to jump over some of the hurdles that we faced early on. And so one way that we thought we might smooth the path for future network creators was to build the implementation toolkit. So the implementation toolkit shares several resources. I shared the link in the chat. It shares several resources across 5 different categories of work that we've done. So here, maybe I will just share my screen and walk through it. There we go. Yeah, perfect. Can folks see that? Oh, excellent. So, like I said, it's broken down into 5 resource sections. First is how to build a community. Second is building out a technical infrastructure. 3 is building the workflows to get content from members to the MDPN, to our shared preservation service. The 4th is building governance, and then 5, building users. That section focuses on education and documentation. And so I'll just walk through some of these sections really quick. Just to Snowden's point, we really envisioned this as being a way to make the MDPN model easily replicable for any other collaborative group of users who are interested in building their own preservation network. So several of the resources we developed during our IMLS grant period are free and available for anyone to use and adapt as they need to. The website that I shared shares several of these resources in more adaptable and usable formats like PDFs, Excel files, Word documents. Again, because we don't want to create any barriers for folks to reuse these materials, right? The information that we've created, we want you to use as well. So just to start, we in building community, we share a visioning workshop template. So very early on in the MDPN's existence, we brought together several stakeholders to talk a little bit about what a ideal statewide preservation service that would serve under-resourced organizations. What does that look like? What are the shared goals? What are the markers of success? And so we shared that planning workshop template here as well. All of these circular, I don't know, rectangular, oval shapes are hyperlinks that will take you directly to the resource on our website. We also offer tiered membership in the MDPN. We did this to accommodate the fact that, right, many of the institutions who we primarily were created to serve do not have extensive budgets, right? We're lucky if they have any budget. And so we wanted to make membership really accessible, especially to the smallest of the smalls, as we like to call them. And so we put together very early on a tiered membership system that allows smaller organizations to opt in for $100 a year, and for larger institutions to opt into MDPN service for starting at the most $5,000 a year. And I would say the majority of our the members, which you can also see on our website under members, and you can see a map of all of our members on our homepage. our members range in different types of institutions, basic that are essentially broken down into three overall types. So we have public libraries, we have museums, and we have colleges and universities. We have a couple of historical societies as well, and a couple of commercial archives as well. But those are the three like primary categories of members that MDPN serves. And we're really proud, I think, of the fact that our membership is so broad and diverse, right? I think one of the reasons that MDPN, I think, has been so successful is we understand that preservation shouldn't just be for universities. It shouldn't just be for public libraries. It should be for anyone who's preserving unique local history. And that has really always been at the core of our work. And so we wanted to make a membership system that allowed for institutions with different means to be able to opt in and access preservation services. The second section is focused more on building technical infrastructure. This is where we really talk about the LOX software, things that we've learned about the LOX software. And we really share some of the code, specific things that we have built over the time that we've had this grant. So you'll see several resources here. Our node host FAQ and requirements document, which we created when we were looking for our several distributed server hosts across the state. We held an open meeting with stakeholders from the cultural memory field across Michigan to sit down and ask us questions about what is LOX, what is digital preservation, what kind of skills should server hosts have. And it was a really wonderful sort of open dialogue that also featured folks from the LOX program who were able to speak authoritatively about the software, and included a colleague of ours from the Alabama Digital Preservation Network, which has been around much longer than the MDPN, to be able to talk about what does the day-to-day maintenance look like. And so it was really important for us to have the people and the information to answer questions that we might receive from server hosts. We also, in this section, have an example of what a LOX node build looks like that we requested from IMLS. We also have a outline of a service level agreement that we had with each of our node hosts. We're actually in the process of renewing these right now. So even this version is outdated by 2 months. And then we have a template of information about each of our nodes. So this is the information that we use to track, different versions of Linux, the version of LOX 2.0 software that they host, the IP address. And so that's sort of central command for all of our nodes. Section 3 is focused on building workflows. So you can see in the diagram here, we use another tool called DART, the Digital Archivist Resource Tool, which is created and maintained by AP Trust. We use that for the packaging of collections by our members. It's then deposited, that bag, on our staging server that we host here at MDPN. We then run it through what we call our pre-process script. So that's this section here, where we run it through a virus scan, we run a droid report, and then we also add that collection to the LOX title database. From there, once it's been approved and run through the pre-process script, each of our LOX nodes will then crawl that content from the staging server. In a really exciting update, we're actually really excited to be using for the first time the new API functionality for the LOX 2.0 software that will automate these crawls by our server hosts once I give the final approval for them and once they run through the pre-process script. So really excited to be able to use this new functionality from the LOX program. We also, in this resource, in this section, share code on our GitHub that we created, so including our Dart configuration file and the pre-process script that I just mentioned. And we're really excited that our colleagues at GinkgoNet in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky are already using these to build their own LOX network in that region. So really excited that these resources are already being used. Section 4 was building governance. And so we, in this section, are less focused on the technical aspects of distributed digital preservation and more focused on the community aspects. So how do you center member governance within a distributed community? And so we share our governance policy here, as well as our membership agreement that we have members sign every year as part of the renewal process, and then a code of conduct and reporting form that applies to all of our events, both virtual and in person. And then finally, building users. So this is the section where we talk a little bit about how do we educate people about digital preservation and how do we educate people specifically about how to use MDPN, right? How to use sort of distributed digital preservation services. So our documentation is available here. So this is the documentation that we share with members to help them learn how to ingest content into the network. And then I share several presentations that I've given to organizations here in Michigan. This is actually why I'm here right now at the Michigan Archival Association. I'm sharing information about why digital preservation is important and how MDPN tries to make it easier and more accessible, especially for small organizations, community archives, corporate archives. And so several of those presentations are available on our website here. And then finally, our onboarding document, which our membership committee created to sort of welcome new members into the community, orient them to how the community operates, where to find information, and share other information that's not just about MDPN, but about the broader digital preservation community, so that they know when they join MDPN, they're not just joining MDPN, they're joining this broader field that is supportive and inclusive. So that's just a really brief walkthrough of our toolkit as an example of how we hope to lower some of the barriers to implementing a distributed digital preservation network using the LOX 2.0 software for others in the future. And we do say at the beginning of this toolkit, under who should use this toolkit, we do have a note saying, right, you might not be using the LOX software, and so maybe the more technical sections aren't useful to you, but you can still use the governance and the building a community sections. Or vice versa, right? You can maybe focus more on the technical sections that are focused on how do you set up an infrastructure for using the LOX software, and you might not be as interested in the community building sections of the network. Although I will say, this grant has taught us that you need both the community and the technology, right? This digital preservation, I don't need to say this to any of you, you all understand. But digital preservation is a people problem, sometimes more than it's a technical problem. And so that's why, even looking at the sections of our toolkit, out of the 5 sections, really 3 of them are about people, right? How do you build a governance? How do you build a community? How do you educate people to understand that digital preservation is important? And so, yeah, I think you can use the sections of the toolkit as they apply to you, but we hope that you'll use them all in recognition that digital preservation is people and technology together, preserving stuff. So that's it. I really wanted this to be a very lightweight and quick because I think I'm more interested in hearing questions from folks. So I will stop sharing, and I hope folks have thoughts or feelings.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Thank you, Snowden.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Good job,
it's great to
Jesse.
hear more. And yes, if folks have questions, please feel free to unmute or add something in the chat and kind of open up the floor for discussion.
Oh, and also just a quick pause. I love to see all of the love for Dart in the chat here. And yes, Scott, we're actually testing 3.0 right now. We're very excited. So, yeah.
Hilda,
Hilda, you have your, oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I see a hand up. I'm always happy to see hands up.
Yeah.
Thank you. So wonderful. I'm sorry I don't have my camera. It's been a wild day and I'm driving.
No worries.
But this has been very interesting. As I mentioned in the chat, I am from Puerto Rico. And I used to work with the creation of a storage for a digital project that we were working on. We opted for in-house storage just because there is a lot of insecurity in terms of funding. So my question about what your project has been working is besides the subscription or like the membership and the participating institutions, how other alternatives of funding are you using to maintain this project?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I think one that we really, looking back on the toolkit, one that we really wish we had developed more information around. So like you said, the first source of income for us is our membership fees. The second is storage fees that are on top of those annual membership fees. So annual membership fees include 50 gigabytes of storage with that base fee. We really felt like it was important to offer at least some free storage, especially for those smallest of the small organizations who might barely be able to afford $100 as a membership. And so that was really important to us. Um, Storage fees are assessed at 50 cents per gigabyte annually at the end of the membership year. So that's our second source of income. Our third source of funding comes directly from the Library of Michigan through LSTA funds. So, as part of the MOU that exists between the Library of Michigan and our host organization, the Midwest Collaborative for Library Services, the Library of Michigan gives the MDPN $25,000 every year. And so, again, that doesn't cover even like the majority of my salary. But right, I think it's having those agreements in place is really important for sustained funding. And then we do receive some support from the Midwest Collaborative for Library Services, our host organization, for things like travel funding that allows me to be here, right, in beautiful Petoskey, Michigan, to share information about digital preservation. Um, so we have always, even in that visioning workshop that I mentioned, we have always tried to make grant funding be the sort of cherry on top, right? In the ice cream sundae of funding, we don't want it to be the ice cream, right? We want it to be for those things that those special projects that we might not do otherwise, for example. So those are our primary sources of funding. As a result, right, we're always looking to bring on new members to help make that funding more sustainable. And then I'm so sorry. The last source of funding that we have is events that we put on. So we held in March a symposium for the toolkit, just to both close the grant and to introduce the toolkit, a sort of like goodbye, hello situation, for us. And we did get some revenue from that event. And so those are our primary events or revenue streams. And we're hoping, I think, to get a better understanding of how much it takes to run MDPN and maybe where the gap is between being financially self-sustaining and not having to rely on the Library of Michigan or our host institution, just in case we were ever that agreement between those two institutions were ever to dissolve for some reason. So
That's very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to note as well that that each individual locks network has a different funding model. Like nobody is doing exactly the same thing when it comes to covering costs and ongoing expenses. We have networks like SafePLN and the emerging GinkgoNet, which are just, no money is changing hands. There is an MOU between the participating network members that says we each commit to providing our own hardware and maintaining those servers and maintaining space on those servers sufficient to the network members' content. And just like being good citizens, nobody has to pay anything other than their own costs. Nobody is obliged to submit any money anywhere. Nobody needs the financial infrastructure that you have to handle payment. I'm sure for those of you who are in larger institutions, you understand how difficult it is to actually let people give you money, let alone ask people for money and then take it. So that is one way people are handling. The Alabama Digital Preservation Network is the financial structure that is closest to MDPNs and is the model of financial stability in LOX networks. They are operating with a significant financial reserve that is sufficient to replace their entire network, hardware and all, from a single surviving node if everybody in the southeast of the United States is affected by a natural disaster or a technology cataclysm of some kind. They have achieved that fiscal sustainability by basically charging members a little more than they need to run the network on an annual basis, having network members contribute sweat equity to the governance and to the programming needs, the technical needs for plugins and information architecture. That surplus also goes to fund hardware refreshes. So that network has been in place long enough that all of the hardware has been replaced 3 times over. And they provide a subsidy to each network node in order to help offset the costs of new hardware. Everybody knows that's coming. Everybody plans for it, and the money's in the budget. So it's that's the model that Chelsea and company very wisely adapted. But there's no wrong way to run a LOX network. And the choice that GinkgoNet made to say like, hey, we're right sized. We don't need, we're all in agreement. We can sign an MOU for support with the LOX program. That's the only thing anybody is paying for, and everybody's paying individually at the same rate. So it's a very equitable and sort of sustainable and lightweight financial infrastructure.
Thank you. That's also very wonderful because I had that as a follow-up. It's like I'm worried more about like the infrastructure and how to maintain it. So can you repeat which state is that one? The one that has all the money in the universe?
That's the Alabama Digital Preservation Network, and I'll put that link in the chat as well. And you can, you're more than welcome to reach out to them. We have a really supportive user community, and so everybody's very happy to talk about their networks. So I encourage you all to reach out if you're curious.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour here. Sorry, we didn't have more time to answer more questions. I think my presentation could have been at least another 10 minutes less. But yeah, thank you both, Aston and Chelsea, for presenting and for sharing all this information about the toolkit and locks. And yeah, I guess we should wrap up, and we hope to see everyone in September, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
And if you have questions, we can always email me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're easy to find.
Yeah.
Bye, all.
Awesome.
Bye, friends.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.